Hello and welcome to another episode of Paradox, Untold Stories from the athletic directors in our country. I want to thank you for tuning in again. I want to also thank our sponsor, Ticket Spigot, the official ticketing sponsor of the NIAAA. And joining us today is Mr. Mike Ellson. And Mike, we're just excited to have you. Welcome to our show.
Danielle, Dustin, thank you so much for having me. And I'm looking forward to spending a fun hour with both of you.
And as we mentioned, as Mike mentioned, Danielle LaPointe, Dr. Danielle LaPointe is my tag team partner in this, my partner in crime, if you will. And I'll let Danielle introduce our guest and let's get this thing started.
Well, thank you. You didn't introduce yourself, Dr. Dustin Smith, my partner in crime. But I am extremely excited to have Mike with us here today. Mike Ellson, he's the TIAAA Executive Director. He's really involved with the NIAAA on multiple levels. He's on the curriculum development team, and he's a cohort mentor as well. He's also an adjunct professor at Belmont University, which is very cool. I've gotten to know Mike pretty well over the last couple of months, and I'm really excited to hear some of his stories today because I'm very much inspired by his drive to help ADs and like his desire to just improve the athletic administration profession. It's something I'm a strong believer in thinking outside the box, and I think that Mike, you do that, and it's very inspiring to me. So I'm hoping you inspire other ADs across the country today as well. So thank you for being here with us today.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle.
Mike, I want to ask, I always ask this question just because I think it's relevant. But what does the resume not tell us about who Mike Ellson is? We've read through your accolades and we talk about that. And actually, we didn't read a whole long list of them. We'd be here for 3 hours if we went through all the accolades that Mike Ellson is worthy of. But tell us something that the resume doesn't tell us about who Mike Ellson is.
I didn't put down, but it should be like a BS or BA house painter. I have been painted houses on the side for a number of years, and for all of us in education, we could put that extra little degree, if you will, of things outside of education that you have to do to make a living, if you will, especially in the early years of when I started at our school. But you know, I'm a grandfather, and I don't think I put that on there. 2 grandsons in Huntsville, Alabama, and my wife and I have been married 37 years. So we have 3 wonderful children, and it's just been a blast. The school I'm leaving June 30th. When I started here, we had no children. So to see that unfold as a family into being a grandparent has been kind of crazy, but yeah, the painting and the toilet cleaning and the weed eating and all those things are the extras that I've enjoyed that you won't see on the resume.
Do you hire out, or is that just something that's bygone because you're quitting on June 30th?
Oh yeah, we maybe I need to jump back into house painting, but you know, I learned a long time ago to use a tapered 3-inch brush and paint the old wood windows. Everybody now replaces them with the aluminum or metal windows, but you know, back in the day, everybody had wood windows. So learning how to do that, and then being able to take that in and paint the locker room, and you know, paint a bus or whatever it might be, was a lot of fun and direct correlation or connection.
Wait a minute. Did you say paint a bus?
I was going to get on that one too.
Sure. And you know, a lot of it would be maybe touch up or whatever, but think about the world of being an AD, designing a bus. What's on the outside of the bus? What is the messaging? What's the branding? And you want it to look clean, right? And up to date. So if it starts fading, you throw a little paint on.
So you were rapping before rapping was cool, is what you're telling me.
Trying to.
WRAPING, not RAP.
There you go. Branding, right?
I want both.
Now, if you were Mike the rapper, what would your rap name be, Mike?
Oh
Ooh.
boy, that on the spot. That's if anybody knows me, they know that's the last thing you're going to get. That is not on the resume. We'll get Dan Talbot in here and let him start rapping.
Yeah, Dan or Steve Throne, one of those two.
Exactly.
Well, I know
Okay,
you've
Mike.
had a really long, career. You're talking about 34 years. So I'm like, I know you have some stories in those 34 years. I know you got some good ones.
Well, I've been thinking about this, and it's hard to, tie them all into three and keeping everybody innocent without naming any names. But when you start a school, I was very blessed to get to start a school from scratch and to get to be the first coach and the first AD for over 3 decades. But back in the day, let's go late 80s, we played an independent school schedule. And what that meant is we were trying to find games with anybody that said they were a school. So we found some church schools, and we brought one in, and I was coaching basketball at the time, and we brought them in, and it was really conservative. And I can say this because I graduated from a Bible college. The girls were wearing culottes, and the guys were like in sweats, in pants. You couldn't wear shorts. And I actually played college basketball and had to wear sweats going to an ultra conservative school. But anyway, so we've got one of the students playing the drums on the stage. And this church school walks in and they said, "You better stop the drums or we're leaving." And they had driven like an hour and a half to play the game. And you got to understand, you're so desperate just to find schools that you can play before you're in like the state association. And I'm like, his nickname was Wild Man. And I'm like, Wild Man, you gotta stop. You can't play. And so he had done everything to set up. Anyway, we play the game. We probably won by 40 or 50 points. So we schedule, home and away. So we go to their school, church school. The deacons and the elders are the officials. We took a 40 to 50 point victory. We ended up getting blown out by 30 or 40. I got teed up twice. Now, I don't know where this ranks in your list of crazy stories so far, but when you think about going to an opponent and seeing the elders and the deacons being the officials, you tell me who's making the calls. So looking back on my career and thinking through both of y'all are looking like stunned, like it's hard to even talk about it.
I have so many questions. Like they're just piling up in my head right now. Like, why couldn't you play the drums? And like, holy conflict of interest. And there's just so many thoughts going on.
Well, we couldn't play the drums because they didn't have music, and they thought it was offensive. It was rock and roll that we were playing the drums just to try to get the gym alive. And so that for one. And then, we were using sanction officials, even though we weren't in the state association. Little did I know, being a brand new 20-something-year-old coach, that we were going to be going to church schools where they needed to save money. And that's why they were using the elders and the deacons as their service to the community. And for me, and I've been at a Christian school, but for me to get teed up a couple of times, thankfully you didn't get thrown out back then. That was not a good reflection on our school, but I was hot.
So let me ask this question, Mike, just from an elder and deacon perspective. And I've been in several churches in my life, and I'm thinking the elders and deacons are there about to do the right thing.
You'd think.
So this wasn't the case, apparently. I mean, clearly, if you got two technicals, it wasn't the right thing.
We've heard "Where's the beef," and I was asking, "Where's the balance?" Because it was a struggle.
I have this mental image in my head right now of like what happened during this game. It's like I, I can't talk.
Well,
Well, and loving it, we all love and respect officials, but that was I'd never saw it again in my whole career, but that one moment, I'm like, wow. And you've heard of, schools feeling hosed when they go on the road or whatever, but that might have been the ultimate hosing.
so I've heard some school board members be some some officials at some places, but I've never heard deacons and elders being the officials. And I think about our buddy Jim Harris, and I say our buddy because I know Jim's a buddy of yours too. And
Yeah.
and Jim probably would have gotten thrown out even when you couldn't get thrown out back in the day if that was the case. Because he'd been thrown out. He got thrown out of JV basketball games.
Well, and let me share the rest of the story. So here's how bad it was. And this, God rest his soul, this gentleman just passed away a couple weeks ago. He was in his 90s. One of the dads, an older dad, was so mad at the deacons, elders slash officials that his wife would not ride home with him 90 minutes. She ends up riding home with the senior pastor's wife, and the senior pastor ends up taking this dad of ours home. He was so mad.
Whew.
If that tells you the rest of the story.
But they didn't take
This
you
was a
home.
good night. This was a good night for you.
It's definitely in the memory bank of this, my 35th year at this school. It definitely stands out as one that's like hard to believe it even happened. But by golly, it sure did.
So were you AD at the time too?
Yeah, I mean, for the first couple of years, like 87 through 89, I was doing all the AD work. I was the only coach, coaching multiple sports. So officially, I was like the AD for over 30 years. But, at the time, yes, I was acting AD, scheduling officials, doing all the things an AD does. But it didn't land on my contract until 89 or 90.
So I'm wondering, just what's that conversation like from AD to coach at that point? When you get two technicals, what does the AD say to the coach at that point?
Well, I've got the senior pastor and all the board members on my side, so there was no reprimand, and they were like, "We would have been so hot. You at least handled yourself in a decent manner." But they were like in disbelief. They're like, "Is this what we've created a school, to go compete against, and or build an athletic program around?" But it was definitely wow. I can't believe I
Did,
forgot to say the rest of the story on that dad
did
and the
you
mom.
did you ever play that school again?
We did not. That was a two and done.
A 1 year
We've heard,
wonder.
we've heard of one
I
and done.
mean,
That was a
but like
two and
80s
done.
80s talk, right? Especially when you're independent and you're trying to find schools of your like status. So how do they even get other schools to play them after that gets out? Like I wouldn't want to step into that. You're setting yourself into a very bad
Because
position.
there were like 20 schools that you were trying around the state of Tennessee that you're just scrambling to find competition. And so you just had to, it's kind of like taking a charge in the lane. You just had to take it. But boy, did that teach me to be prepared next time we went into what we thought was a nice little pristine area of the state in schools. And you had to be prepared for anything. In other
Right.
words, there ain't no love in this little town.
Right. Especially even with deacons and elders. I mean, you would think of all people, that just blows my mind that you would get that kind of treatment. And I understand the quote unquote saving money. I get that. I mean, we've all done that as ADs trying to save money, but man, I can't understand how you can put your head on your pillow at night thinking we did the right thing.
But not even to like tell you. It would have been different if one calls were decent, right? But also like, hey, heads up, this is what we do. Don't be shocked when you come into our gym. That really would have set the whole tone for a much better experience instead of walking in and you're like, what? I'm sorry, what?
And remember, what set the tone for both games was the drummer. remember when they walked into our gym when we played them in November, and then you go back in January, and you're like in shock. I don't know
I would have
which
been
one.
calling the drummer. I would have been like, "Get to the school now. Go. Get over here."
So
Get behind
let,
the bench.
let me ask this question, Mike. If you had gone there in November and they come to your place in January or whatever, would you have had the drummer in hindsight? Would you just left him on there and just said, "Hey, it's our place. We're going to have the drummer there."
I would have, but when they're threatening to walk out the door,
Right, and
like
you
You
need a
want to play
game.
the game.
we just, you look at the student athletes, which is why we all got into this. You're like, we're just going to have, like I said, take a charge in the lane and eat crow or however you want to frame it up.
So, I mean, just going from a 40 to 50 point win to getting blown out at their place, and it wasn't like it was a totally different team.
Exactly. That's
There may have
exactly.
been 8. You may have been playing against 8 of them.
Yeah. Well, remember back in the day, there were like 2,
Right.
but here's the problem: who's working the book, who's working the clock, who's taking the tickets, all of those things we deal with as
Right.
ADs, and it was their volunteer service.
Cooking the books, as some could say. Well, I
This
just
is a story that I'm like, I am struggling to wrap my head around because it's so extreme in one. Like, I mean, I get it, but and to just be treated in such a poor manner is it's unfortunate, and it doesn't make you want to go back to that school, which is unfortunate for both athletes on both teams, right? So now both kids essentially lost a potential opponent. So yeah, this is just I don't know what I would do if I walked into a gym
uh,
and
I
saw that.
I think some of that is it's just unfortunate for kids. I
Hmm.
mean, forget the deacons and the elders and all that stuff. It's just unfortunate for kids, and why we do what we do is for kids, and just trying to give them a fair shake and a fair attempt at this thing, and to not have that opportunity for them is unfair. It may have been fair for their kid. I don't know if it was fair for their kids, but it was really unfair for Mike's kids and for Mike as a coach and for. Uh, I sympathize. I say I sympathize. I don't understand it from a private Christian school perspective, because we don't have to. I haven't been at a school where I've had to do that. Just trying to find games to fill a schedule because we have games set up. So I think that's a different dynamic that I'm not used to, and that I can't really put my mind around because I haven't been in that environment.
So I feel like, and I'm glad that you point that up because that's a really good point, Dustin. But I have been in that exact situation where it's a brand new school, it's independent, you're trying to scramble to figure things out. And with that being said, I feel like I'm on Mike's side heavily on this because I would never compromise the integrity of the game and my athletes to to save that money. And if I did have to save money and cut corners some places, I would still make sure that the integrity of that game was still there. That's something that I feel really strongly about. So it's kind of really, hopefully, that's never happened. This is not a common thing. Our listeners can't resonate with that, and they won't have to experience it. But that is unfortunate because I wouldn't do that, and I was in that situation. And Mike, you wouldn't either, and you were in that situation.
Well, and you just, again, you just pick yourself up, you learn from it, you see how you don't want to be, and what are you willing to compromise? What are you sacrificing for victory? Is that was my biggest takeaway. Like, we're not going to have a win at all cost, and you can sugarcoat it with acting like it's the right thing to do, but that wasn't the right thing to do, and it ended up helping me in my career lay an early foundational lesson of this is how you do not want to be.
And
But I,
sometimes I
I
feel like those are the best lessons, right? What you don't want. Like, I don't want to ever do that to someone, and I don't want to be perceived this way. And sometimes those are the best lessons for ADs.
That's right.
well, and Mike got to experience that on the wrong end of things. So it wasn't like they were victorious and said, "Okay, now we go back and do this differently." This was they were on the wrong end of the scoreboard and the wrong end of the treatment, and that's where you can take this. Hey, we're not going to do that as we move forward, And I'd be interested to know the conversation with the team in the locker room and leaving back and heading back to your place. It's an hour and a half drive. You're with them. What's that discussion like to try to say, okay, sometimes life's going to throw you some things that you don't have planned.
Well, one of my players who's now actually has children at our school, but I had to throw him off the bench. He was so mad and acting out. Like I said, I wasn't an angel getting teed up twice, but I had to throw him off the bench, and of course had to apologize to him because he was 16 years old. What are you going to do when you're seeing this unfold, and then you're seeing your own parents going just berserk at what looked like an imbalanced, unfair situation? But you go in the locker room, and you're like, well, we're not ever going to play them again. We've stuck with our commitment. But remember, how you treat people really matters, and what goes around comes around. What's ironic about that whole scenario? That school, I don't think survived another 10 years. I don't even think they're a school. And there were several smaller schools like that I've watched dissolve through 30 some years. That for our school, I've watched this go from no fields and one building into, if you pull up our school online, you'll see this just incredible, beautiful campus with plenty of a great theater and academic buildings, administration buildings, fields, courts, so on and so forth. So I felt like we took the negative and we turned it into a positive that this generation and future generations are going to benefit from.
And you said that was early on in your time. That wasn't like it was yesterday. That was early on in your time, and I think it speaks a lot to the loyalty that you have to CPA, that you have been there for 30 plus years in spite of some of these challenging situations where you may have had to be the coach and the AD and coach multiple sports and paint the bus, apparently, whatever, all those other things that you had to do. I think that's a testament to you and a takeaway that you can look back on some 30 plus years later and say, that was a learning experience for me as an educator. And I know you're big into the growth mindset. And maybe that was a growth mindset for you back in the late 80s to say, hey, this maybe spearheaded my growth mindset process as I got to learn from that early on in my career.
Yeah, no doubt. The word example is a big word for me. And so thinking about, do you do things so people will look at you and think, oh, he's awesome or she's awesome? Or do you do things because you want others to emulate your behavior? And that was a big takeaway right there. We saw an example we didn't want to be like, so we turned it or flipped the script, if you will, into, okay, we're going to treat officials with respect. We're going to get the very best because we want to demonstrate respect for our opponents, not just for ourselves. So yes, early on, that was a big takeaway.
Man, this just blows my mind. I just keep wrapping my mind around trying to figure this one out. And I know you've got more stories that we're going to get to dive into, but whew,
I know.
that's a humdinger, as they say, just to get started.
And I really want there to be like film of this. Like I want to see the 20-something Mike go on the sideline just going crazy. I want to see it. And there's probably not film though, is there?
Oh, there's some film because there was no way I was sitting in the chair as a coach, and had the blessing of coaching many a years. And there's one where we ended up, we lost a school for like 7 straight years, and we were growing our program. And I hope you hear me say this with humility, but at this point in our school's history, we've won like over 250 team championships. And back in the day, when we won our 3rd championship, it was like a district level. And there's film footage of me jumping, literally doing a spread eagle like a cheerleader. And by the way, cheerleading is a sport and they're very athletic. But I'm like doing a spread eagle, and it's off of one step, out of my mind, so thrilled for a victory that we had won like by 1 point. And I used to be embarrassed about the video, but I'm like, okay, 1 step, who knows how high the vertical was, but that was captured on film. And so, yes, Danielle, there is a little bit of footage of my enthusiasm as a coach.
I'm gonna need to see
and,
that.
and an AD.
Yeah, because I've got this visual of Mike because I've known him for a few years now, and I've gotten to spend a lot of time with Mike, and Mike and I talk almost weekly, even to this day. Um, and just to know Mike's passion, um, and Mike's passion is not just for life. Mike's passion is for CPA and what they've done there, and you can understand somebody who's poured 35 years or 30 plus years of their life into a school and helped develop it from scratch. That's that's understandable why it's his baby, and that's why it would be a passion of his. And so for him to see that passion probably portrayed when victories happen. And I tell my coaches, all we've been blessed to be able to win some state titles. And I tell my coaches, you appreciate every one of them because you don't know when that next one's coming. And for Mike, when number 3 happened, that was a huge moment for their school and for Mike. It wasn't just for the kids that played; it was for those people who have poured so much of themselves into that place.
That's right, no doubt. And as I'm sitting here thinking with you guys, the real unsung heroes are our spouses. When you're thinking about the world of being an athletic director or being a coach, and you have a supportive spouse, like I have had an incredible supportive spouse who taught fourth grade for 15 years. But we have to have those anchors in our lives, and my wife Mary has been that for me through thick and thin, through deacons and elders, through doing a spread eagle and painting the bus or whatever it might be. So that's been pretty precious.
So, Micah, I don't want to put that story to bed. Well, I got to put that story to bed, and I know you probably don't want to hash it out anymore. What story can you give us now that can continue on this conversation that we're going?
I would say, thinking back, when you're growing a program from scratch and you don't have fields, if you will, we had to have. There was early on we couldn't afford soccer goals, so we had a welder weld together steel pipes and put frame up 2 goals. Well, you did it up on one field, and we probably had to carry it a quarter of a mile. So you get some students, and we're carrying it, and we're all like tongues are hanging out, we're exhausted, and we get near the end, and I look over, and 2 of the young men were hanging on the goals while we're carrying these
Oh
goals.
boy.
Okay. One of our early coaching hires, this is probably early 90s. One of our coaching hires, I'm not going to say his name, but he and I laugh about it to this day. He was so calm. He said, "Gentlemen, put the goals down or put the goal down." He went over to the 2 individuals that were hanging and he hung them. He grabbed both of their hairs of their head, and I don't know how he did this, by the hair of the head. He lifted them off the ground and he shook them. He's like, "You enjoy being up off the air. You will not do that ever again." He sets them down. We pick up the goal. We go move it down to the field, and then we go get the other one. I have thought about that image, and again, you had to be there. And I'm not doing Thorny or Dan Talbot or Becky or whatever. They can add a lot of flavor to their stories, but if you were there, that was like one of the most funny moments I've ever experienced. And I just started crying. I was laughing so hard, watching him lift these students off the ground, pulling their hair. Now, I don't know what would happen today, but back in 91, that was okay.
I'm sure you know what would happen today. I mean, if we're going to be honest. Now, if he could have picked me up by the hair, that'd been really impressive. That's not as impressive for me as it is for some other people. But
Oh,
I just go back to I mean, if you're laughing so hard, and again, I go back to, I understand it's 91, but was there not a way to haul those things, with a gator or with something to get that down there where you wouldn't have to carry them?
we didn't have a gator. We didn't have a golf cart. We didn't have anything. So we ended up taking it to what we called a field of screams back in the day, which is now this gorgeous place we call the Den. But we didn't have a choice. And so we used to get students out of class all the time. We need your help moving things. And when you're a builder, when you're building a program from scratch, those are just the little things that I guess you could write a book about it, but people may not believe it. But what I didn't believe, and these boys are like 14, 15 years old, I couldn't believe the strength of that man. I guess adrenaline was just kicked in to no end where he's shaking them, saying, "You will not hang on those goals."
Was the rest of the trip silent? Like, it was just a silent trip. I bet you those boys weren't talking very much after that.
It was, except for me crying. It's so funny.
Yeah, if I was you, Mike, I would have said, "I'm not saying anything to that dude. I mean, if he picked up those kids by the hair, he may pick up me by the hair too."
We waited about 5 years before, and he dies laughing now when I bring it up. But for him, it was like just one of those moments, you know.
I think the funny thing is you guys just picked up the goals and went about your business. I mean, the fact that you just saw these two kids being grabbed by their hair, and then you're just like, "Oh, it's nothing. All in a day's work for picking up this thing and moving it back down there." Oh, and then we got to go get the second goal too. So it's just all a normal routine for us.
The task at hand.
I mean, there's something to be said of no matter what happens, you just continue on and you carry on. Adversity may hit. I'd be willing to bet those young men didn't hang on those goals again.
Oh, no, of course not. I don't even know if I went to his classroom again.
Well, and this was pre the dates of having to have the goals anchored down so that they couldn't topple over on somebody, apparently. But if they were welded, they may have been heavy enough you wouldn't have had to worry about it.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. Remember, these are steel poles that were built into or turned into two soccer goals.
They're not light like they are now, where you can go grab 5 kids and move them quickly.
Exactly. Well, you can almost move a soccer goal today with 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, especially if they got the wheels on them now, that you can rotate them around. And you probably would have loved to have wheels back then.
No doubt. Well, and that's where the perspective of just looking back on all the years has just been so awesome. And what a privilege to get to see it from literally the womb or from birth, to where it is today.
So when you moved these goals, did they stay there after you moved them, or did you have to move them every game to get them there where they needed to be?
No, they stayed down there for a year or 2.
Yeah, they're permanent. I bet those 2 young men weren't asked to move the goals again.
So no one wanted to move the goals after that.
And I don't even think they played soccer. They really sacrificed for the program.
I also bet you those boys have never forgotten this story either.
No,
those boys remember.
There's no doubt. Now I don't bring it up to them, only to the coach.
Yeah.
Now in his 60s.
How tall was the coach?
Like 5'10".
Oh.
No, that's what I'm saying. And these boys were like 5'11", 6 foot, and he just lifted them. I mean, the brute strength that I witnessed. You've heard of cars being lifted, in an emergency, if you will, which is not funny. But his adrenaline was so sky high. I don't know where he got the strength. It's like Samson all of a sudden in between the pillars.
I would think that'd be, hey, there's my first strength and conditioning coach right there. If he can do that, really, he knows what he's doing. That's just my thought, anyway. I mean,
exactly.
And your stories make me think, Mike. I'm like over here trying to wrap my head around all your stories.
But let's ask this question, Mike. What are takeaways from that? I mean, there's got to be takeaways from those. I mean, every story we've talked about in this podcast, and this is episode 10, and this is a big milestone for us. But as we look back on it for you, Mike, what are some takeaways or a takeaway from that situation that you have even now that's some 30 years later?
Well, it's the whole basis of what you all are doing with your podcast. Let's have fun. Ronnie Carter was the executive director of the TSSAA retired about 10 years ago. And I asked him, I said, Ronnie, do you have any advice for me, as the next generation? And he's like, Mike, make sure the students have fun. And so all of those stories just built fun into the dream and the vision and the growth of the school. But I think it made me appreciate all the little things. Like when you have to literally with your bare hands, you've got to move these things or teach your young men and cheerleaders and parents about, we're going into hostile territory with deacons and elders. And you just like, you got to, I think expecting the unexpected is a big takeaway, but it was so much fun growing it from nothing. And nobody can ever take that away. And I think we did it right. I think we did it well. And those little stories gave our community, okay, you got dads bringing a welder a half an hour before a soccer game because the steel, the weld is coming undone or has cracked, and they're having to weld it, and the officials are coming over to inspect. Is the goal good enough or safe enough for us to play? I think all those little things, Dustin and Danielle, have made it fun. Maybe back in the day, it didn't feel fun at certain points, but it's made it all pure joy, if you will, to be able to grow this from nothing.
Well, and clearly you had fun because you were crying. You were laughing so hard at the situation. So how long did it take you to grab hold after that? Did they carry on without you while you were having your moment of laughter?
Oh, no, they had to have me because the goals were so heavy. So I couldn't even wipe the tears away from my
You just had to jump right back in.
Yes. I'm like, guys, I'm sorry, but what I just saw, I still can't believe. And those boys didn't say anything. But like I said, the coach and I have died laughing about that since that time.
Well, I think I would have died laughing from the time I put that goal back till we had to go back and get the other goal. There might have been a lot of laughter in that moment for me.
No doubt. No doubt. We will not hang on those goals.
And you've since had better goals. I say better goals. I don't know if better is the word. You've had more easily movable goals than what
Lighter
you had
goals.
at that point. But better goals, I guess, is the way to put it. So we've talked about deacons and elders. We've talked about welded goals. Do you have another story for us that can enlighten our day or brighten our day a little bit?
I would say be careful on giveaways. And so in the late 90s, I'll keep it there in case anybody hears this. We had a local dentist want to put their business on little gold basketballs, right? Little spongy handout at the door. Didn't we just see a giveaway at a hockey game where there was like some giveaway and they were just, somebody had a hat trick or something. They were throwing them all onto the ice. Did y'all see that?
Yeah.
Anyway, so we give away these little gold basketballs. Thank you to the dentist on the most hated rival game of the night of the season. Well, we win a close game by like 2 points. We shake hands. We're walking off the floor. One of the students in the student section who's been heckling the opponent all night long. Remember, I'm the AD and the coach. But when I'm coaching, you're laser focused on the 32 minutes and the scoreboard and in between the lines. He gets this idea. He's walking along. He steps on one of these gold basketballs. He steps on it. He stops. You can see if it was a cartoon, the idea light bulb pop up above his head. Hey, I've got an idea. He bends over, picks up the ball, and throws it into the visitors section. Well, it turns into a battle ball contest. 2 young men who, if you knew them, you would appreciate the story more. They were helping, throw the gold balls. They're like, oh, there's our mentor. We're going to follow his lead. And so they rifle them in. I asked these 2 young men, the one who threw the ball, he was guilty, confessed to me, and we've laughed about it since. Again, he's in his 40s now. But the two young men, I watch the game film and see them follow their mentor. I said, gentlemen, did you all throw the gold balls? No, sir, Coach Ellson. No, we did not. We did not throw them. I'm like, guys, come here. I want to show you the film. When I showed them the film, this may not be professional, but I was sitting there crying, laughing so hard. I'm like, guys, you're on. And back in the day, in the 90s, film was a lot more rare than it is today. But they're launching those gold balls in against this opponent, this rival. And, I had them dead to rights. So anyway, you had to be there, but it was hilarious and another crying moment, if you will, of laughter that, following my mentor. So Dustin, you're my mentor, so I'm going to watch you. And if you start throwing gold balls at Danielle, then I may be tempted to pick one up and start firing away.
Well, see, I feel like you kind of dodged a bullet here. Like, did the visitor not throw them back? Was there not like this big?
Yeah, that's what I mean. There was, you can see on film, they start firing them right back into our student section. And thankfully, there was no melee, like no fights broke out or anything, but it was pretty intense. And we never gave away a gold basketball with a business logo on it ever again, because they turn them into weapons.
So where were you during this time?
Oh, I'm going through the handshake line, and then
and you just see balls flying over your head.
Oh yeah. And you know what's funny? I cannot find that film anywhere to save my life. And I just think God's saying, no, Mike, I'm not letting you have that film. Again, that was another, crying moment of joy. And when you're coaching a game, man, and it ends and it's been intense and it's your rival, you want to see that. You want to get through the line and then get out of there. So little did I know, but I asked the student filmers, I'm like, guys, keep the film rolling after the game. I want to see if we have a celebration or whatever. And sure enough, they did. And we were able to see the culprits.
So
watch your dodgeball game.
Black and white footage, right? This was in color. This was where you could see. I mean, we're talking late '90s, and some of our listeners may not understand what film was like then, but it was color, and you could actually see what was going on.
Oh, no doubt. Like I said, I saw the two exactly, and they were rifling any ball they could find. They were just picking it up and fired it away.
So this straight dodgeball ends up what happening. They're just firing it in. They're just trying to throw balls at each other.
Exactly.
How long did this happen for? Was this like an extended period of time that there was this
Yeah, it was like 2 or 3 minutes because the police. Oh boy, do y'all know Andy Griffith? Griffith show.
Oh yeah.
I won't say which police officer, but one that sat in the bank. That was what our students has as a nickname for one of our officers, was like Asa. And he just standing there watching all this unfold. Like, you can't make this up. It's like a movie.
So did you get in harm's way? Were they aiming at you, or did you?
Oh no,
I
got out of there. Yeah. I shook hands, and then we went to stairwell because I had to go talk to my team.
Yeah, you had the coach hat on.
I was like, he put the coach hat on real quick. I was like, good luck out here, everyone.
Threw that AD hat away.
You all deal with it. You got it.
Did you have an assistant at that time?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
No, I'm not talking coach. I'm talking athletic. The administrator on duty at that point was not you.
No, it was like our head of school, who said it was one of the worst nights he ever had as the head of school.
Like, how do you even stop that? Like, you have police there, your head of school's there, you're there, and like balls are flying back and forth, and there's like no quick way to end this impromptu dodgeball game. That is, yeah, that's like the nightmare, I guess, of free giveaways, right? Throwing things up into the crowd are the same, right? You're going to have the same expectations. Like, I was always concerned someone was going to like dive for it and like fall down the bleachers. Like, all of these nightmare scenarios are occurring in my head. It happened for you.
No doubt. No, we watched it, but again, we haven't given one away since.
Well, I have a life rule, Mike, that I do not intercept a punch intended for somebody else. And I'm not going to get out there and intercept a ball that's intended to be hit or thrown at somebody else. I'm not going to get out there in the middle of that. Um, we had a soccer fight a couple years ago, and when I talk about a soccer fight, this goalie from the other team came from about 40 yards and was on dead sprint and speared one of our kids, and everybody's asking, Dustin, why weren't you out there sooner? I'm like, I'm gonna let him get tired first, and then I'll get in there and get in the middle of it. But I'm not gonna get out there and intercept a punch intended for somebody else, like you weren't gonna intercept a ball intended to be thrown at somebody else.
Well, and they were going 90 miles an hour. One of the guys that was throwing them is like a fastball pitcher on our baseball team. It's not like they were lobbing them into the student section.
Is it safe? Is it safe to say there's like hundreds of balls just flying in every direction?
Yes. Yes.
So it's like a food fight. Once they see it going, it's on then.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say war zone because that's too serious, but it was kind of like a war zone, if you will. If you were looking at it, just like all these images of balls going back and forth.
People are
Now,
ducking.
how big is the gym? Just so we can get an idea of how. I mean, is this like an arena like now, or is it a tight space that
It's kind
is
of like a 1,300 seat gymnasium.
okay?
Yeah.
Were the
And a
parents
heated
in on
moment
this?
and a close game and all the factors that would make this even raise the level even more.
You know, Danielle, the parents weren't involved, but I never got a complaint from the parents about these because they were involved in the rivalry as well. It's like a community rivalry. It's not what it used to be, but it was intense.
So they kind of sat back and just like laughed at the situation too. Didn't really intervene, didn't contribute, but they thought it was entertaining at your guys' expense.
Yeah, and if they didn't think their reputation would have been tarnished, they probably would have been firing them as well.
Well, that's one of those situations where you can just have everything in place. You can have everything done correctly. You had the police there, you had the admin there, everything is done correctly, and you just can't control, that passion and the rival, and it just happens, and you kind of got to figure it out after the fact and roll with it. But I'm glad that didn't happen in my gym.
Well, think about it. You're like glad a business is going to sponsor
Mm-hmm.
you money to your school. So you're like,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, but you better know what you're giving away. That's a takeaway there.
I feel like you should call the dentist back and be like, "Let me tell you about the exposure you got last night."
Oh, he was at the game. His children were probably firing the gold balls. I could see him on. But oh yeah, he was at the game. Him and his wife. Yeah.
What did he say? Did he say anything?
He's like, I'm sorry. Had a little smirk and a smile under his breath. When you have a community rivalry, you guys know this. It's deeper than the students and coaches.
Yeah.
It's at the restaurants and the grocery stores. It's 24/7.
But I'm glad that it wasn't like a bowling ball giveaway. And in this kind of a situation, I mean, at least the thankful thing on my part is it was a gold ball that probably wasn't real hard, especially if the kid stepped on it and smashed it a little bit. So, I mean, it could have been a lot worse than what it was. Not saying it wasn't bad, but it could have been a lot worse had the giveaway been something a little more solid.
Do you all remember Dwayne Shinsis played for Florida, played
Yeah.
basketball in the 90s? Do you know what happened at Vanderbilt? Like he got in trouble or something happened with him at Florida. Well, Florida comes to Vanderbilt. They throw tennis balls on the court. It cost Vanderbilt the SEC championship because they teed him up because the game wasn't over. Florida goes and hits technical free throws, gets the ball, ends up scoring a bucket and wins the game.
Whew.
So there you go.
Speaking
Nightmare. Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Did you see Lane Kiffin throw out the first pitch the other night?
Yes.
And I know that's close to home because it's Tennessee, but Danielle, if you didn't see it,
I did not.
during football season at Tennessee, Ole Miss, the fans of Tennessee pelted the field with all kinds of stuff. Bottles of mustard. Who brings that into a game? I don't know. But bottles of mustard. They were throwing tennis balls. They ended up throwing a golf ball and hitting Lane Kiffin with a golf ball. And this was from the stadium. I mean, they're not people on the sideline. They're actually fans. And so Lane Kiffin the other night, when Ole Miss is hosting Tennessee, I believe is who they were hosting, he walked out and threw a first pitch, and it was a golf ball. He had the baseball in his hand, but he dropped it and threw a golf ball as his first pitch.
That's funny.
Was that against Tennessee, Mike?
Absolutely. And I think the Ole Miss faithful really enjoyed that moment.
Yeah, I'm sure they did. I'm sure the Tennessee fans did not appreciate it as much, but I mean, just some of this stuff that happens even now, and just fast forward that. I mean, Mike was talking about a story that was in the late '90s, and here we are now in 2022, and this was a real life situation that happened, and this was fan behavior. You don't have a plan for somebody bringing a bottle of mustard and throwing it on the field,
Right.
but stuff like that could happen, and that's the crazy thing in my mind is I guess it just evolves with the time. That was something that happened in the late '90s, but this is a relevant event that happened just this year that
Well,
we're
and
referencing right
getting hit with a bottle of mustard or a golf ball would hurt. I mean, I feel like the takeaway for this for high school ADs is like if you're gonna have giveaways to their games, make them soft. That's the number one thing. If you're gonna do it, make them soft and squishy. But I can't even imagine. Like, I'm guessing the bottle of mustard was full. You don't throw an empty one, so
I don't know what
that
the
would
point would
hurt.
be.
Yeah.
I mean, they had to delay the game in Knoxville because of all the stuff that was coming out. And it was like Mike said, their mentor, they saw one person do it, and then all of a sudden, here we go. The Donnybrook happens, and they start throwing it all. And it's, I mean, everything. They're throwing beer cans, and I've seen the prices of those beer cans. And maybe this is just because I'm so cheap, but I wouldn't have thrown it if that. I mean, one, I wouldn't have the beer, but two, I wouldn't have paid that price and then thrown it and wasted that money that I just spent.
No doubt. No doubt.
I
That's
would
how
have
we
drank it first.
eat.
Um,
So it just, I mean, some of these things that just blow my mind.
yeah.
And Mike, I know you've done this a long time, and we've got some very young ADs that listen to this, and we've got some very new in the profession ADs, and then we've got some seasoned ADs. Um, as you look at these three stories, and as you've begin to wind down your time as an athletic administrator on a campus, what advice do you have for our AD listeners at home that may be tuning in to say, hey, how can I maintain and continue doing this? Because the lifespan of our ADs is 3 to 5 years. How do you have that stamina to make it 30 plus years?
Well, number one, I think it goes back to Ronnie Carter's advice to have fun. I talked about my spouse Mary just being an incredible anchor, supporting me through thick and thin. When things are going awry, just being that anchor, if you will, of support. You got to have fun. You got to enjoy this. And I still do not have it figured out, but try not to take yourself too seriously, which again is the beauty of what you all are doing with this podcast. You're bringing the lighter side of athletic administrative moments to the forefront. I think just have fun and surround yourself with good people. That's really, really important. What's your inner circle? And I've been telling our students this semester at Belmont University, we have 22 in our interscholastic sports admin class. And I'm like, I want you to think about, is an athletic director a manager or are you a leader? And for every young AD, be encouraged to be a leader. You're going to have to manage and do things in the unseen that nobody will ever know. You can't expect to get any credit, but be a leader. Your coaches, your parents, your student athletes, they need you to be that community leader, not a manager. And so that's my encouragement. And to me, if you're that leader, then you can have that sustainability that we need in this profession to go, instead of 3 to 5 years, let's take it from 7 to 10 and beyond. And don't use the athletic administrator as a stepping stone to being a principal. Take pride that it's a premium position of leadership in our school settings.
Well, you talk about being a leader, and I'm gonna get real deep with this comment, and may blow your mind. But the old statement is, if you're leading and nobody's following you, you're just out for a walk. So make sure that as you're leading, you have people that you're leading. I guess is the way to put it. Not just be a leader and say, "Well, I've got the title because I'm the athletic director, so people have to follow me." That's not being a leader, and I don't think that's the leader you're talking about.
No, it's having an innovative mindset. It's having a growth mindset. It's reading great books. It's taking every LTC course that's imaginable that's out there. It's having conversations like I've had with both of you throughout this past year, especially, of just iron sharpening iron. How can I get better? Have people in your life that are going to be willing to speak the truth and share your weaknesses so that you can turn those weaknesses into strengths. I think that's really important. And that was well said, Dustin, by you, to just make sure you're not doing this, you're not usurping your power because of your title only. Titles mean jack nothing. It's the journey and the people you're around that really, really matter.
Well, I think we've also learned that if you need a bus painted or a house painted or goals carried, Mike is your guy. So if you're around the Nashville area, Mike is your guy. And if you're going to the AD conference, the National AD conference, Mike will be prevalent in that because it's being hosted in Nashville, which is going to be an exciting time in December if you're going. And I can speak on behalf of Mike. I just know Mike's heart. If you have questions, if you want to reach out, Mike's a great resource, and he's willing to pour into you. And the cool thing about Mike is he makes you think like you're the coolest person in the world. And that's just a gift Mike has. When he reaches out to you, he makes you feel like you are the best AD in the world. And that's an incredible compliment to who Mike is.
Thank you, Dustin. And yes, please, I would love to make connections with folks and even give my cell number. I don't know if you've been collecting cell numbers. Have people been giving those out?
Well, I've got all the numbers, but I don't give them out unless you tell me I can give them out.
Absolutely, yes. I look forward to, because when you end up trying to help somebody, they end up twofold helping you. So it's a boomerang effect, and that's an awesome way to develop relationships and friendships in this profession. And we all need those bat phone calls where if we're having a hard day, we can pick up the phone and call and get some advice, encouragement, and help.
And just sometimes to see the lighter side of things, right? Because if you're going through it, you don't find the funny until years later. So I would like to, encourage people to find the funny sooner. Like, you did everything, find that funny sooner, and just kind of laugh at yourself, and then spread it so somebody else doesn't get stuck in the same situation. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here. But yeah, having fun, I think, is really important to, as we were talking about, extending the years that we see people in the AD role. I think that's a huge part of it. The more fun you're having, why would you want to leave? So I encourage that, and reaching out and having network of ADs is just it's vital. And everything you do, Mike, thank you so much for, I really, I say that wholeheartedly, when you are improving the athletic director profession with everything you're doing. So thank you. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for all of your contributions.
Thank you so much, Danielle and Dustin. It's been an honor to be on this podcast, and hopefully one or two or three of these stories will be able to help others if they're able to listen. So thank you.